David Nelson. Welcome to the ThriveIN podcast. Happy to have you in the podcast studio today, and I'm excited to share your story, your personal story, and your professional story, and how you're impacting Wabash County on a daily basis.
Well, I appreciate it, and I'm honored and thrilled to be here.
David, for our listeners, he's at every event in Wabash County. He may not stay till the end, and he may not be there when it starts, but it's funny, you are seriously at every single event in the county.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I try to hit the major ones, and that's not minimizing other events, but there are some events that it's expected that I attend. There's others that I would love to, but time constraints, it's impossible.
Yeah. For our listeners that aren't familiar with your name, I'm sure they've seen your work. You're currently the editor of the Indiana Plain Dealer. Mm-hmm. And how long have you been in that role, David?
Well, it started out as the Wabash Plain Dealer, as everybody in the community knows, and that was a twice-weekly paper when I came aboard 3 years ago, and I was the managing editor of that publication. And after a couple of years, things changed, as things constantly change right now in journalism, especially print journalism, and even now television journalism. That's taken a hit. And we merged 3 newspapers, the Peru newspaper, the Huntington newspaper, and the Wabash newspaper merged into one and became the Indiana Plain Dealer. And fortunately, I was kept aboard, and I'm still an editor with the paper. It's more nowadays, for those people that are familiar with journalism, I'm more of the Wabash County bureau chief. I'm still an editor. My main responsibility is covering everything that goes on. Hopefully, I cover everything that goes on in Wabash County.
Yeah. What does that mean for you personally to be able to cover a community like Wabash? And I know you get outside of Wabash a little bit, but what does that mean to you personally?
Well, Wabash County is a great landing spot for me at this point in my career. I can't say enough about the community. They welcomed me from day one, literally day one, and I got to meet a lot of very kind, nice people on the very first day. I mean, my first meeting that I covered, my day started that particular day at 8 a.m. At 9 a.m., I was at the Board of County Commissioners meeting, and they couldn't have been nicer to me. And I thought, okay, I think this is going to work. And it did. I went from that assignment. I was over at the university later that day, meeting the soon-to-be new president over there, and they couldn't have been nicer to me. And so I was off to a flying start, and it's been a wonderful experience. It's different nowadays than it used to be. Mm-hmm. My first newsroom that I worked in had 30 people, and just in the newsroom. We had probably 100 employees in the entire building, but 30 were in the newsroom. Those days are over for the most part at the majority of newspapers. The bigger cities still have a sizable staff. Again, nothing like it once was. I've gone from a newsroom of 30 to now a newsroom of 1. And so it's quite a change. Being able to cover a county, one person, it's not really possible in the sense that it used to be. Again, you kind of have to pick and choose the major things you're going to cover, the lesser things, and not saying that they're less important, but in the grand scope of things, you're just not going to be able to do. But I try to find a balance with the way I do things and the things that I enjoy covering as well, and bringing my sort of mark or way I do things to the publication.
Well, I enjoy knowing you as a friend, seeing you out on the river trail, walking around downtown, or at Founders Day Parade, we'll cross paths. You always have a camera in your hand, whether that's an iPhone or your DSL. You're always ready and equipped.
Yeah.
And photography has really taken more of your attention and probably is more of your passion than journalism. Is that fair?
Well, they're both very important, and they have equal importance in my life. My main way of making a living is still journalism, whether it's writing or photojournalism. So that's still very important to me. The extension of that, which is my artwork, which is, and we'll talk about later, is the more outside photography, nature photography. And that is, it started out as a way of escape to handle the stress of being in journalism umpteen years And that has taken on a life of its own, which I thoroughly enjoy, but it has taken on a life of its own. It's no longer just a hobby or just a way to relax, but I enjoy it. But I still, if I'm going to do anything, I want to do it well. Therefore, the journalism still is of great importance. Am I getting near the end of that career? Sure. I'm much closer to the end than the beginning. I've, in one capacity or another, been involved with journalism either full-time or freelancing. This is my 33rd year.
Wow.
That's a stretch. That's a long road to go. And yeah, the end is much sooner than the beginning. Am I grateful? Yes. It's a hard life. I tell young people who are constantly coming to me who are starting out in that field, I tell them it better be a calling, because if you're doing it for any other reason, it's going to be even more difficult. So I discourage them. I say, if this isn't a calling, if this isn't something you feel led to, do something else.
So did you feel that calling?
Oh, yeah. It was literally a calling. Yeah, I had my first job in a newspaper before I even graduated college.
Okay.
I got a phone call from an editor before my senior year of college. And this is where I wasn't even a journalism major.
What was your major?
At that point, I had finally decided on communication arts.
Okay.
And I thought maybe it was going to be in print or television, but I was one of those kids in college that I just had really no sense of direction as far as a career, because it was one of those, I went to college because for a certain generation, that's what you did. You went to college. Looking back now, I probably should have made some other decisions, but there you go.
So
I'm sure there's a few professors that was sitting there going, yeah, he wasn't the most. But once I found classes that clicked, then everything fell into place. But I got a call from an editor at a newspaper, and he said, "You want to come in and be an intern?" And I said, "Well, I think you got the wrong guy." And they called me in and they explained the situation, that they had talked to a professor of mine, and he said, "Well, Nelson writes well and writes really good papers." And they were looking for somebody to kind of train and coach up the next generation of journalists. And they called me in, and I said, "I still think you got the wrong guy." And they said, "Well, why don't you write some stuff for us and let us look at it?" And I am reluctantly going into this. And they said, "Well, it is a paid internship." And I said, "Okay, when do
sign me up?"
Because at that point, I'm to make a happy buck, if you will, in college. I am doing, driveway sealing, roofing, anything hard and physical labor that other people didn't want to do, I would do because it was good money. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't afraid to get my hands dirty. I wasn't afraid to get dirty, hot, sweaty, and work really hard. So, but at that point, the thought is, when you're young like that, you're thinking, oh, wait a minute, I can make more money and not break my back. And, okay, yeah, this would be a nice way to make some money through my senior year of college, mm-hmm. interning. And I got the internship. I got the job. And the funny part about that was, the first night I got called in and my little orientation, the editor said, "Look, we'll ease you into this. All you're basically going to do right now, you're a glorified gopher. You're going to answer phones, take some notes. You're going to type." Back then it was called, on the sports page, it was called Agate. It was all the scores and stuff. They were like, "You'll help out with sports. You'll type in some scores. You'll answer the phone. You'll take scores. If there's any other, the phones go crazy, you're going to answer the phone. We'll ease you into this world." Because up until then, I had no experience with journalism, and I didn't even think of it. And it was the first night, and they said, 6 months, that's when you're going to write your first story. We're going to ease you into this. And I said, okay. So, I think that was at 6:00. So I start, I'm typing in stuff, I'm answering the phone. 7:30 rolls around, and I notice there's a meeting of what editors are left, and they're meeting in the conference room. And eventually, one of them waves me and he goes, "Nelson, come in here real quick." They sat me down, and they're like, one of our people, or one of our, I think, I'm not sure what they referred to him at that point because they weren't happy. Somebody called in sick, and they had a story due that night, and they needed to fill the hole. And that's essential content. Even now with the podcast, content is king. You've got content is key. You've got to have content. And back then, this was a daily newspaper. They needed stories to fill the holes. And so this particular person called off sick. They needed a story. And they said, well, you're sick. They're looking at me and they said, guess what? You're 6 months. Your probationary period is now over. There's the computer. There's a notepad. There's the phone. We got to have a story. And we'd like to have it by 10 o'clock. Okay. So by now it was about 7:45. And nowadays, hearing, well, you got to have a story done in 2.5 hours or whatever.
Yeah.
But then I'm thinking I had never written a newspaper story. Not a school paper, didn't do anything for any school yearbooks, nothing. So I got thrown in the deep end the very first night.
Do you remember what that story was about?
Yeah, it ended up being for the sports page.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which you don't really cover sports here locally.
No. Those years are long past.
So from that traditional journalism, which back then, did you have to take photos for your articles?
No. Well, back then things were so different, and our newsroom was so big. We had 4 full-time photographers. Literally 4 times as many photographers back then than now. We have a person doing everything for one county. I mean, it's amazing. Back then, there were people that went to college to be just a reporter, just a copy editor, just a photographer. And so everybody had their roles. And I started cross-training, if you will, because they made the mistake of putting my permanent desk next to the photography desk. So I got to sit next to all the photographers and watch them in action. And I had, before going into writing, more of an art background. I took every art class you could in high school, and even in college, I took a lot of fine art courses. So, if you will, my formal background was in arts. And so I was watching the photographers, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. I like that. And I had never really dabbled in photography. Everything else, I mean, I could, and I don't mean to brag, but I can draw and I can paint and I can do a lot of things artistically. I don't think at a high professional level, but I'm adequate. And I'd never done photography. It just was never something that I thought about doing. I had a camera growing up and I tinkered, but as far as doing what they did, I thought, well, I could never do that. And so I started watching the photographers. And back then, on an assignment, the reporter would go out and the photographer would go out together. And so I got to know the photographers really well. And I would ask them more and more questions about their trade and their craft and their skills, and realizing that, this is really interesting. And so I started, a family member had gifted me I think it was a Nikon. And this was a, film camera back then. This wasn't digital, and it was manual. You had to do all the settings yourself. It was a good training, good learning. And so I picked the brains of the photographers on staff. And I remember I had ingratiated myself enough to them that the photo editor would occasionally slip me a roll of film. Here you go. Let's see what you can do.
Okay.
And, back then, if you were lucky, you got 36 exposures and not 24. And that was a big deal because back then, you couldn't just fire away, 100 shots. I shot a concert, and in 30-minute performance, I don't know how many, I think 200 shots I took just to get something I was happy with.
Here recently.
Yeah. And so that was a great advantage of digitals. But back then, you really had to know what you were doing. You had a roll of film, and they didn't have, you couldn't waste it. And it was, back then it still is called framing. You basically you worked with a shot, you had about 3 shots. The first one, and that middle one, and then that third one. By the third one, by the time you got it developed, you think, okay, that's going to be the good one. You hoped, at least. The worst thing in the world for a photographer back then was to get back to the dark room, go through their roll of film, and you go, oh my goodness, none of these are good. Which didn't happen with that group, because that group at that paper, there were three of them that were one of the most talented photographers I've ever worked with. And at that time, and still to this date, if you were to go around to a certain group of people and mention their names, they were very renowned in the field of photojournalism. They were fantastic.
So when did you feel like it became part of what you were doing, not just a kind of a side hobby, but it really became part of your journalism?
Yeah, I would say about 20 years ago, when all of a sudden the newsroom started to shrink and you had to be multi-talented. And if you could do well at photography, you just opened yourself a bigger door to stay. And I hate the word relevant, but it's used a lot in my industry. You found a way to stay relevant. Mm-hmm. And so I learned how to do, and now my graphic design skills they're horrible compared to what at one time I had pretty polished and could handle my own. But again, you're going back a number of years on that. If you could write, if you could do graphic design, if you could do photography, you were going to be in pretty good shape and be able to find a job somewhere. Mm-hmm. If you were limited, it was going to be difficult. So fortunately, I could write and make pictures. And again, they're both storytelling, but they're two very different disciplines. And it's difficult to master both.
When you're out covering a story here in Wabash County, do you find that a photo will then lead you to how you write the article? Or is it the other way, or can it go both ways? Like you mentioned this concert you were at the other night.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're going to prepare an article on that to cover
Not that particular one. No, that was just what we call, it would be a standalone photo with an extended cut line, which is just a caption of the photograph. Oftentimes I go in, if it's an actual story, I just want the photograph to complement the story.
Okay.
If it's something that it's just a visual, then it won't even get a story. It'll get what's called, like I said, a cut line, which is it's a caption to the photograph, and it'll be explaining what took place. And then there's other things that you do that one may impact the other. But for the most part, if it's going in the newspaper, my intent is the story, and then the photograph complements the story.
Okay. One of the things that I've appreciated as I've gotten to know you, and then, I've seen you, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but you've got a pretty good following on Facebook, and you share nearly daily. And we'll go into some more details on this, but your perspective, and I mentioned earlier that I saw you at the Founders Day Parade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you didn't know this, but I watched you from a distance.
Okay.
Because for most people, their perspective is there's floats and there's police units coming down the street, and they have this like kind of big picture, right, that they're looking at. And I watched you watch, and it was raining this year, and I watched you look across the street, and there's a young boy and a young girl, and I think their parents were holding an umbrella over their head. You were focused in on those two little kids. I can almost assure that nobody else there, the hundreds of people at the parade, nobody saw that, and nobody was looking for that. When did you, or how has that perspective changed? How have you developed that ability to do that?
Well, I don't think I'm great at really anything. I mean, I can name somebody that's a better writer, and I can name somebody that's a better photographer, and certainly a better editor, and certainly a better journalist. But I think I can hold my own when it comes to storytelling. And whatever medium that has been in my life. Like I said, I started out, I was very fortunate. I had a family that fostered my creativity. So whether it was, starting out just first with reading comic books and then them buying me great works of literature, I mean, it didn't matter. It was always about the story. And you can do that in any sort of artwork. So the groundwork was laid by a fantastic family that fostered that and encouraged that. So the storytelling to me, no matter what it is, no matter what type of artwork or what type of journalism it is, and again, I'm living in both worlds, and that all comes together in that. It's looking at something and saying, well, what's a good way to tell the story? And then within that, where is a sense of something unique or looking at the world a little bit differently? And so I can only say that it's just been, decades of honing that craft. Again, there's people that are far more talented than I am in all those categories, but I think I'm pretty good at telling a story. And I think I bring a different kind of perspective to things.
Well, and as the sole storyteller for our community in our paper, you cover everything from live entertainment on the Honeywell stage, from musical acts to ballets, the parade. You covered J.M. Reynolds, their big 50th anniversary celebration. So you're covering all kinds of different things. But you're right. In all of that, you're telling a story. That's not always the case for every photographer. A photographer will specialize in wildlife or nature or big performance. You cover a lot of different things.
Well, I'd like to think I'm a well-rounded individual. So I have different interests. And some people may think, well, he just, if on social media, you go on Facebook, you're either going to see it'll be pictures from around the community. And those pictures on my Facebook, that is just somebody in the community sharing good news in the community. That's really not a journalism on that, because we do have with my company a policy that on our personal Facebook page, we're not really supposed to post stories. We're not to, but the photography, that is simply somebody who's embraced a community that they thoroughly enjoy. And I'm just sharing the good news. Again, you go on my Facebook, personal Facebook, I have to write about bad stuff sometimes in the paper. There are horrible, terrible tragedies that happen that I unfortunately have to write about. But quite frankly, on my personal Facebook page, I just want to share some good news. And so my way of doing that is the photographs around town. And again, I'd like to think I'm a well-rounded individual and have a lot of different interests. As far as the personal stuff, yeah, that's the nature, and that's me giving a little bit of myself out there of what I enjoy. But again, I think a good photojournalist has to find numerous things interesting, and at the heart of it is the person. And then within that, they say the windows are the eyes to the soul. And so there's a lot of shots I get that I'm concentrating on the expression as much as the event, like you said, the big picture.
Well, if you don't mind, we'll share in the show notes a link to your Facebook page.
Sure, yeah.
So our listeners that aren't familiar with David or aren't friends with him, David goes for these nearly daily walks, and you've kind of titled this series of photos. What is that title?
Greetings from the Trail. Now, I only post those, sometimes, especially during the fall foliage season, the autumn season, I posted more of those. But on average, if I'm lucky, I'll post one of those once a week. But yeah, I do go on daily walks. Yes. I just don't take the camera gear with me.
Yeah. And again, it's about the perspective that I really appreciate when I'm looking at your photos, because I spend a lot of time on the River Trail, which is one of the areas that you go to. I also spend time at Salamone, which I know you go to as well. But the little details that you'll find, it's a little bird on a limb that for 99% of the people that are out on the River Trail or out at Salamone are going to walk by, and they're enjoying nature, don't get me wrong, but they haven't really identified that one little thing that you do.
Thank you.
And I like to take photos too, nowhere near your level, but I think most people do, right? And for me, it's like I go to Colorado and it's a change of perspective, it's a change of atmosphere, scenery, and I'm taking all these photos. But when I really, really think about it, we can do exactly what we travel to go to another country or another state. We can do it right here. We just kind of have to turn that perspective in our eyes and our minds. For somebody, if you're trying to teach somebody or inspire somebody to think about something differently when they're out on the river trail, What could you tell somebody? How do you get them to kind of slow down and look at it differently than they're used to?
Well, it just takes time. You have to be, you're not going to be able to do some of the things that you see other photographers do right away.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to be able to, and again, this is no knock against education or anything like that. Go out and get the formal training, but it just takes time and experience and practice and looking at things maybe it literally with a different perspective. There was somebody that once said to me, and I don't even remember where it came from, but they said, well, when you're hiking, don't forget to occasionally turn around and look where you just came from. And then they were right, because sometimes everything changes on the course of a hike. Lighting, especially the time of day I go, the lighting changes, the weather changes, the animals are active, much more active when I go early of a morning. So everything is changing, and sometimes just looking back, you get a different perspective. Sometimes just, I've taken a number of photos on my belly. So,
Get down and change your level of where your eyesight's normally at.
Sometimes it's just doing that, and then the rest of it really comes in time. And you can go and you can get the books and you can study and you can watch. And there are now tons of YouTube videos, tutorials, and those are all great. But there's no substitute for just getting out there and don't overwhelm yourself with, well, I've got, if you don't even take a picture on that particular day, don't get all worked up about, well, I've got to do this. Mm-hmm. Because then that takes the joy and spontaneity out of it.
I appreciate that idea of turn around and look from where you came.
Mm-hmm.
I float the river quite a bit, and
Mm-hmm.
I've invited you out to kind of give you a new perspective of the river.
I'll eventually get out there, just schedules.
But I find myself turning around and floating the river
mm-hmm.
backwards.
Yeah.
Because it looks different. You don't ever get to see it from the other way.
Nature changes. Well, I say changes. The way it looks changes within minutes. Just yesterday, I went on a hike, and I started the day off, and it was very cloudy. Then it became overcast. Then it became partly sunny. The trail looks totally different, and depending on the light. So just in the course of 30 minutes, that whole scenery, it changed the look.
And that can happen without moving, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you just sit in one spot.
Yeah, if you take a little bit of a break every now and then. If I'm going to go on a longer hike, I'll take maybe a half-hour break somewhere on trail. And the whole landscape can change, the whole look, the lighting changes, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. This time of year, as far as getting wildlife, it's a challenge because we're in the midst of hunting season. And the deer are more reticent to go in certain areas. And so both our furry and feathered friends are a little more skittish this time of year. So it's a little more difficult, especially for the way I do things. The whole point of the Greetings from the Trail is to document a hike, what presents itself on that given hike within those miles. The only time I'm sitting down is when I take a break. And there's a lot of photographers, and it's great. I relish when I eventually have the time that I could sit somewhere for 3 hours and wait. I don't have that luxury right now in my life. So these pictures are as it's happening. And I totally understand people looking at my work going, well, it's nice, but it's not a calendar of the Colorado Rockies. Well, it's not meant to be. And I will tell those people looking at the calendar that you bought from Colorado better be nice, because the guy or gal that shot that picture, let's say of maroon bells, they probably spent, and this is no joke, a week to 3 weeks on that one picture, going back to that spot. Those clouds hopefully aren't photoshopped in or AI or anything like now that we've got to contend with. But that particular shot, to get everything to fall together, was not just done in a half an hour. And so, no, my stuff it's in a way, it's an extension of photojournalism, because photojournalism is an event as it happens. You're not posing people and all of that sort of thing. It's not a photo shoot, for a magazine. So the Greetings from the Trail, I'm hiking, and this is what presents itself. Now, do I have an idea sometimes of what I'd like to have? Sure. Yeah. On this particular day, this particular weather, cloud formations. Okay. I think if I go here, I can get this shot. And again, it doesn't always work out. The things with the animals, I don't have a lot of wildlife because this is as it happens. Now, I know where they congregate, but there's no guarantee they're going to be there. And again, most of where I hike, whether it's in a nature preserve or it's not, it may be an old logging road or an old service road, and I may have on either side hunting areas. So again, that dictates a lot of what I can get wildlife-wise. I'm looking forward to the day when I have more time that I can, sit a couple hours and have a really nice lens. And that's the other thing. The lens I'm carrying, I only max out at a 300 because I'm not going to be, this is around my neck and I'm hiking. I'm not going to be hiking with a huge lens. So I'm limited by time and equipment that I can carry that isn't going to wear me out. Mm-hmm. So.
Do you have a favorite place in Wabash County to photo?
Yes, and I'm not going to reveal where that is. Because it is not an official trail. So I can say that.
Okay.
It's not an official trail. It's not on a map.
That's good to know.
But it's nothing that I'm not trespassing. The DNR people are well aware of me. I just had a wonderful conversation the other day with state conservation officers, and they are well aware of where I go. And as long as I have my blaze orange on this time of year, but even now I'm very limited on that particular trail. We're knee deep in, again, hunting season, and even though that particular trail hunting isn't allowed, it's awfully close to where other areas are. So this time of year, I probably won't be on it until January. But yeah, there's some old abandoned logging roads and service roads that are wonderful trails, and they're just there are a couple people, our little secret among our little community. Mm-hmm. And yeah,
well, and kind of expanding on that, when COVID did,
I'll tell you after the podcast.
COVID brought good things. If you choose again to this perspective idea, COVID did bring some good things. And I used to go out to Salamone on the Bloodroot Trail or the Preserve, Hathaway Preserve, or any of the local trails. And most of the time, if I saw another person or two, that was be about it. And this was pre-COVID.
Oh, yeah.
COVID happens, and people need to get outside, and all of a sudden you've got preserves that are adding new parking lots, parking spaces because there were not enough to keep everybody. And I love that for everybody else, that they now feel confident, they go out. Mm-hmm. But for me, it's no longer the same as what it was, 8 years ago or 10 years ago when I go out there by myself. Yeah. But I love it for everybody else.
Sure.
Is there a photo that you wish you could take over again? Like when you got back, you realized you missed it.
I have decades of photos I wish I could. That's the great thing about the aging process, if you will. Artists, until they've peaked, we tend to get better with age, whether it's writing or photography. So, years worth. Okay. I can't say one because, like with the writing, I'm not quite ready to hang up the pen yet because I've been told, by people that are close to me and that don't pull any punches with me because I don't want that. I'm my own worst critic, but I have people close to me, family, that if they notice if there's, and I say, if I'm starting to slip with the writing, let me know. And they've said, well, no, it's tighter than ever and it's effective and you've still got it. Okay. And I'm not saying that to brag. It's just, quite frankly, you get to be my age and I've earned the right to say, well, I'm not slipping yet. So the writing's there. The photography is improving as well. So that's the great thing about, somebody who is an athlete. There are certain sports, they're peaking at 30, With the thing about creativity is I'm in my, going to be 55 here in 2 months. And I'm noticing only improvement, which I'm very grateful for. And like I've told friends and family, if I start slipping and I'm embarrassing myself, let me know. But there are decades worth of photographs I cringe at that I would do different. So I can't narrow it to one.
Now, how about kind of the adverse? Is there? This is like asking somebody to name their favorite child, but do you have that one photo that you're like super proud of? Maybe it was because it was the environment or what you had to do to get that.
There's a couple. The first picture I took where I thought that I could actually say I was a photographer, I took in 1990. I'm going to say it was 98. Yeah. And it was a covered bridge during a snowstorm. And I got out and I hiked. And this was the full manual camera. And so I didn't even know at the time what I had. And I took a picture, did it in black. And kids out there, the film, you got color or black and white. So I got black and white. I thought, I'm going to go for this because an early hero of mine was Ansel Adams. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to try to do an Ansel Adams. If I fail, nobody will know except the person processing, because I hate developing film. That's one of the parts of photography, the old school stuff, I don't miss. Again, Ansel Adams, he was a master in the dark room. He could manipulate the image and take a picture he took and take it to the next level. I did not enjoy the darkroom process. Now with digital, I do enjoy the editing process, but I think my art background comes into play there. But I remember, again, going out in a snowstorm. I even took my tripod and I set up in the snowstorm and I took the picture and again, had no clue what I had. Went back, got it developed, and I thought, oh, okay, I think I can do this. And I was very pleased with it, sold it. And so I thought, okay, and then subsequently had enough confidence within photojournalism to go to editors and say, I can take pictures too. So again, but that particular picture, recently I've taken some stuff that I really like and think, okay, I'm sort of hitting my stride. Okay. There were years where I took stuff and I thought, it's okay, it's fine. But I think I'm the writing end of things. And again, going back to that, that's what I was known for so many years was my writing. And I was pretty confident. And again, it's not that, I tell anybody, there has to be some degree of confidence to do this for a number of years. And then, so the photography, and I say that to juxtapose next to the photography, I didn't have a lot of confidence in my photography for a lot of years. And I didn't really feel like I had found my style. The writing, I found my style years ago. The photography, within photojournalism, I kind of found my niche. But as far as the artistic end of things, the artwork, the greetings from the trail, that took some time.
That photo of that covered bridge, when's the last time you went back and looked at that?
Well, it's one of the few things that I have framed that I've kept as my own.
Okay.
So it's in my house, so I see it every day.
Looking at that, does that inspire you to move, like that was a leap for you at the time? Mm-hmm. Does that inspire you to continue to take those leaps and to think outside of like what you think is maybe in your limits? What does that picture do to you when you see it?
Oh, it takes me back to a very happy time. It's a completely different time. I mean, you're talking a number of years ago. So the world was very different. Again, this is there were digital cameras, but they weren't really, let's see, 98, yeah, a lot of newsrooms were using digital by then, but still a lot of the amateur photographers and kind of people out there were still using film. So it was very different. The internet was just starting to so it was still a very different world. Mm-hmm. And to me, I look back at that at simpler times.
Okay.
So I don't even look at that picture as far as photography. I just look at it as simpler times. Where I was living at that particular time, I was living in Kokomo.
Okay. You mentioned, while you were talking about that covered bridge, you mentioned that you sold that image. Mm-hmm. And a couple of times you've kind of talked about how the photography side is becoming a passion in a way that maybe you're thinking about income. Can people find your artwork here locally?
Yeah, you can go to the Wabash County Visitors Center, the Welcome Center,
Okay.
and they're going to be selling my work here within days because I've dropped it off, and it's just a matter of them putting it on display, which I'm very grateful for, very honored and very humbled and very excited about. It is on display, and you can purchase also at the museum here in Wabash,
Okay.
Wabash County Museum. Yeah,
Well,
and I'm thrilled, and there'll be more on my photography coming out there in the future. That's all I'm not sure what all I can say yet, but people will be seeing more of that there as well, in addition to what's available at the gift shop.
You heard it here first.
Yeah. I don't think Teresa will be too upset. I mean, it's, but there are plans for my work there in the future.
I'm excited for you. That's pretty cool to see this kind of come full circle for you.
I am greatly humbled and just very thankful to this community in more than one way.
Well, as a community member, I want to say thank you for covering our community in the way that you do.
No, it's a great place. It really is. I've worked in a lot of places, and it embraces people, especially when you're somebody that you are earnestly trying your best, and they recognize that. You're giving it everything you got. I think somebody that earnestly makes an attempt to do their best, this is a community that will absolutely embrace you and help you to achieve those goals.
Well said. David, I want to thank you for coming into the studio. I've got a few more questions I want to wrap up with, but I was curious, what keeps you inspired every day to cover Wabash County, to take the photos, to write the articles, or to get out on the trail? What is it that's really driving David Nelson?
Well, again, I'm in two different worlds, the journalism and the art, the nature. The journalism is just providing a good quality product for people that deserve it. It's as simple as that. The other end of things is going on these hikes is, for me, more than just a hike. It's exercise. It's a hobby. It's my prayer closet. It's my art. It's my getting out and sharing things with other people. It's a challenge because each time I go out, I have a personal challenge that I want to at least get one good quality picture. So there's a lot going on other than just, well, he's going for a nature walk. Yeah. For me, and again, for other people, go out, enjoy it in that. For me, there's a lot going on there. So.
I thought we might wrap up with some kind of quick fire questions for you, if you're okay with that.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. I promise I won't ramble for these.
All right, David. Sunrise or sunset?
Sunrise.
Wabash River Trail or Salamone Reservoir?
Wabash River Trail.
Wildlife, landscape, or people?
Oh, boy. Oh, that's not fair. That's not that. Oh, since this is a new for you, are you going to give the participants one pass?
Yeah, well, sure. We'll give you a pass.
Okay, I'm going to pass on that.
We may come back to this one. Black and white or color?
Oh. Color.
One Wabash County location you still want to photograph?
Oh, I don't think I've taken a picture yet around Salamone. I mean, I've taken some photos around Salamone that I like, but I don't think I've gotten one yet that I say, okay, well, that's the one I wanted. So yeah, around there.
Around Salamone. Mm-hmm. As far as cameras go, your DSL or smartphone?
Well, oh boy, they're both invaluable, especially for a hiker. Okay, if we're going to limit it just to that, well, no, actually for photojournalism, I've got to tell you, the smartphone has really been a huge help in both areas. Yeah, if hard pressed, if I've got to have one, probably at this point, stick with the smartphone.
Smartphone.
It's so versatile.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go back to wildlife, landscape, or people.
Well, here's the problem. I'm already in trouble because I should have said people. So I'm in trouble anyway. But yet I love I love the wildlife and I love the landscape. And to take that away from me, I can't do it justice because I'm going to offend somebody.
Well, this isn't about trying to offend or not offend somebody.
Well, at this point in my life, I do love being out in nature. Not that I don't enjoy the events, but there's a certain boy, I don't want to have to. I've already answered it. Like I said, I hope I haven't offended people. So, but I do. I mean, if I couldn't do what I do in journalism if I didn't enjoy people as well. So, that's a tough call. That's the tough one. That's difficult for me.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Not surprised to hear you say the iPhone is not the preferred camera, but if it's the one you can't, like, you would rather, if you had to get rid of the one or the other, you'd rather get rid of the DSL.
Yeah, because for both worlds that I'm, traipsing through, whether it's journalism or out in the woods, having that phone it really helps. Now, I can't with the phone do the telephoto stuff and get the stuff at a distance, but from a certain point inward, it's serviceable.
Yeah.
With photojournalism, other than the concerts, I can use it for pretty much anything now. And again, it's very handy to have, and it's almost mistake proof for people that know how to use it properly. So it's nice, but I still want to encourage people that are serious about photography is to study it, get the books, watch the YouTube stuff, experiment with different cameras. They still make film. Well, they don't. They make film for cameras. It's harder, more difficult to find. There's people now that are still, just doing film, and they either can send it out to process, or there's people that still have dark rooms. So find what's best suited for you, but study it and practice.
It's an art. I mean,
it is. It is. An art. Yeah, it definitely is. And I consider myself an artist, and I like what the great photographer Annie Leibovitz said. She said, "I'm an artist, and my brush is my camera." So I can understand that.
Well, David, thank you for coming into the studio, sharing your past experience and kind of your passion for photography and for doing the journalism that you do to cover our county. I hope that our listeners, whether they follow you on Facebook or maybe are going to be new followers to you, that your photography inspires them to look at things differently right here in our own community.
I appreciate it. And I can't thank you enough for having me on this, and I can't thank you enough for your encouragement and the people in the community. Like I said, this has been an absolutely wonderful place for me to land. I had some choices when I came back into this, and boy, am I glad that I chose this particular community to come to. I just can't say enough about everybody here. They've been wonderful to me. I'm humbled by it. I'm grateful. I'm thankful. And it's been different being on this end of the questions for sure. And again, I apologize to you and anybody out there if I rambled, because I'm not used to this.
You did not ramble, and I am honored that you would sit in the opposite chair.
And you're doing a great job at this. So if you would like to go into journalism, for anybody out there who might want to.
No, you cover our county every single day. We're trying to complement that here with the podcast.
Oh, you guys are doing a great job.
With uplifting stories, the people behind the scenes that sometimes that maybe you don't have the opportunity to cover, to tell that little bit of a backstory on a business owner or the photos that are coming out of the county. So thank you again. You've mentioned it multiple times how generous the people here in this community are.
Well, and it's just not me saying that. If you talk to the folks at the Community Foundation, and they do these studies, Wabash County is consistently in the top 3 most philanthropic communities in the state. Mm-hmm. So not only, are they giving of their money, but their time, and just, again, it's a very kind community. And And as somebody in my profession, boy, you just can't ask for any more than that.
Yep.
It's fantastic.
And this podcast is made possible by the generous people like you speak of, the Lisa Gilman Investment Fund, the Sandra Kunkel Trust, Mark and Amy Ford, Paperworks Industries, the City of Wabash, the Community Foundation of Wabash County, and Visit Wabash County. This ThriveIN Wabash County is a production of Destination Wabash County. And David, thank you again for being here. Until next time, I'm Adam Stakeman, and this is ThriveIN Wabash County.